Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to this special episode of what I like to imagine as Conversations with Madiba. That's what many people called me Madiba, my clan name, a term of endearment in my Xhosa culture. I'm Nelson Mandela, and though I've been gone from this world for some time now, my spirit lives on through stories like these. Today I want to sit with you, as if we're gathered around a fire under the African stars, sharing tales from my life. I'll take you through some of the darkest valleys and the brightest peaks, struggles that tested my soul, and the triumphs that reminded me of humanity's unbreakable spirit. You see, my journey wasn't just about politics or power. It was about people, about fighting for dignity and equality in a world that often seemed bent on division. For those who might not know, I was born in 1918 in a small village in South Africa's Eastern Cape, into a royal Boo family. But my path led me far from those rolling hills, into the heart of a brutal system called Apartheid. Apartheid was a policy enforced by the white minority government from 1948 onward, segregating people by race: blacks, whites, coloreds, Indians, forcing non-whites into poverty, denying us basic rights, like voting, owning land in certain areas, or even sitting on the same bench as a white person. It was a system designed to crush the human spirit, but instead, it ignited a fire in many of us to resist. Let me start with one of the hardest chapters, my time in prison. Where do I begin? It all culminated in 1964, when I and several of my comrades in the African National Congress (ANC), our liberation movement, were sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage against the apartheid regime. We had turned to armed struggle after peaceful protests were met with violence, like the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where police killed 69 unarmed demonstrators. I was 46 years old, full of fire, but suddenly, the world shrank to the cold walls of Robben Island, a bleak prison off the coast of Cape Town. Robben Island was no ordinary jail. It was a place meant to break us. We were forced into hard labor, quarrying lime under the scorching sun, our hands blistered and eyes strained from the glare. The guards treated us like animals. Black prisoners got the worst food, like watery porridge, while others fared slightly better. But even in that despair, we found ways to hold on to our humanity. Robben Island was no ordinary jail. It was a place meant to break us. We were forced into hard labor, quarrying lime under the scorching sun, our hands blistered and eyes strained from the glare. The guards treated us like animals. Black prisoners got the worst food, like watery porridge, while others fared slightly better. But even in that despair, we found ways to hold on to our humanity. I remember organizing secret study groups. We'd smuggle in books and teach each other history, economics, even Shakespeare. Education became our weapon. One fellow inmate, a young man named Ahmed Kathrada, and I would debate late into the night about freedom and forgiveness. It was there that I learned patience, real bone, deep patience. 27 years I spent behind bars, from Robben Island to Pollsmoor, and finally Victor Verster. My wife Winnie, bless her fierce soul, raised our children alone, facing her own harassments. I missed funerals, births, the simple joy of holding my grandchildren. But prison didn't just take, it gave me time to reflect. I wrote letters to my family, pouring out my heart, and I studied the Afrikaans language tongue of our oppressors to understand them better. You see, I realized that hate is a poison that destroys the one who carries it. One story that sticks with me is when a young guard, fresh-faced and full of the regime's propaganda, started talking to me. Over time, through small conversations, he began to see me not as a terrorist, but as a man. That shift, in one person's heart, showed me the power of dialogue. When I finally walked free on February 11, 1990, at 71 years old, the world had changed, Berlin Wall had fallen, and international pressure had weakened apartheid. But I emerged not bitter, but ready to build. If you're ever feeling trapped in your own life, remember, even in the darkest cell, the mind can soar free. Now, let's move to the negotiations that ended apartheid, a dance of fire and ice, as I like to call it. By the late 1980s, the government knew the system was crumbling. Sanctions crippled the economy, uprisings raged in the townships, and our armed wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, kept the pressure on. President F.W. de Klerk, who had unbanned the ANC and released me, invited talks, but it wasn't easy. We met in secret at first, then openly through Code's 8th Convention for a Democratic South Africa, 1991. Imagine a room full of old enemies, white nationalists, black revolutionaries, Zulu leaders like Chief Bufilezi, who had his own Inkatha party, clashing violently with the ANC. I remember one tense moment during those talks. Violence was erupting everywhere: train bombings, township killings orchestrated to derail peace. Chris Hani, a beloved ANC leader, was assassinated in 1993, and the country teetered on civil war. I went on national TV, urging calm, saying, "This is our country, let us act with responsibility." Behind closed doors, de Klerk and I argued fiercely, accused us of terrorism. I called out the government's hidden hand in the violence. But we pressed on, compromising on a new constitution that guaranteed rights for all. It was like negotiating with a lion. You had to show strength without provoking a bite. In the end, we agreed to a government of national unity, and in 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections. I voted for the first time at 75. The lines snaked for miles, black and white standing together. When the ANC won, and I became president, it wasn't just a victory. It was a miracle born of stubborn hope. If you're facing division in your own world today, know that talking, even with those you distrust, can bridge the widest chasms. Finally, let's talk about my presidency and the path to reconciliation. I served from 1994 to 1999, and my focus was healing a nation scarred by decades of pain. Apartheid had left deep wounds, families torn apart, communities in ruins. I knew punishment alone wouldn't mend us. We needed truth and forgiveness. That's why we created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a dear friend with a laugh that could light up the darkest room. People from all sides, perpetrators and victims, came forward to confess atrocities in exchange for amnesty, or to share their stories for closure. One heartrending tale I recall is of a mother whose son was killed by police. She faced his murderer in the commission and said, "I forgive you." It wasn't easy. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the hardest strength. I practiced it myself, inviting my former jailers to my inauguration, even having tea with Betsy Verwoerd, widow of Apartheid's architect. And then there was the 1995 Rugby World Cup. Rugby was a white sport, symbol of division, Springboks team mostly white, their emblem tied to oppression. But I saw a chance to unite. I wore the Springbok jersey, green and gold, and cheered them on. When we won against New Zealand, Captain Francois Pienaar handed me the trophy, and 60-0, mostly white fans chanted "Nelson, Nelson." It was electric, a nation embracing each other. During my term, we built houses, brought electricity to millions, started free health care for kids. But challenges remained: poverty, HIV/AIDS. I stepped down after one term, believing in fresh leadership. My friends, these stories aren't just history, they're lessons in resilience. Life will test you, but hold on to Ubuntu, African philosophy that says, "I am because we are." We're all connected. Thank you for listening today. If you have questions or want more tales, I'm here in spirit. Until next time, go forth with love and courage. Mlondla.